Welcome to the Great Firechat, a candid update on the latest in China tech with inside experts Kevin Shimoda and Ade DeSantis.
All right, welcome to the Great Firechat. Today we have a special episode. We have a guest, Robby Wade from Thisapp, and we also have Ade with me. Ade?
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and very, very huge welcome to Robby Wade. We're super excited to meet you and talk about your app today.
Yeah, and so today we're going to be learning about Robby Wade's super app, or his app that is very super, and I think has a lot of potential to become one of the first super apps outside of China. And we're going to talk a little bit about Elon Musk stepping away from Twitter and how that kind of opens. He started the global race for super apps in a way. He kind of sounded the horn, and we're going to talk about him now sounding the horn, but then leaving in a way that and making a kind of a lot of space for that in a way. And obviously, my own book, the first super app, has just come out. I just got quoted in the Wall Street Journal, which I'm excited about, talking about super apps, especially with Elon Musk and now Jack Dorsey also making a lot of noise there. But I think the real person that's actually doing stuff in this space, not just writing about it, is Robby Wade. And so we're excited to talk about super apps, talk about his app, talk about this whole space. And we're on video today. This is a first for Ade and I, so you get to see us, the faces behind the beautiful voices. Without further ado, Robby, introduce yourself. Our guests should kind of know us. I think we're also going to be on. This is also going to be disseminated on your own podcast. We can do little intros after, but let's hear from you first,
sure.
Robby.
No, thank you for having me on. I'm humbled to be the first guest. So really excited to dig in, and obviously both of you having spent time in China, it's going to be a good conversation that we can have. And congratulations, Kevin, on releasing the book. I've got my copy coming in. It's probably going to get delivered tomorrow. I bought it off Amazon. I highly encourage everyone to make Kevin some money, purchase a couple of copies. My name is
Also
Robby.
encourage that.
I'm an Australian living in San Francisco. I'm the founder of Thisapp, and looking forward to having a chat with you guys today.
Well, so let's do little intros, Ade. Just little cheeky intros to borrow an Aussie term, because I'm an American living in Australia, and it's fun talking to an Australian living in the America. So Kevin here, and I worked at WeChat for 4 years, and then I've written a book about it, and I've lived in China for a total of 6 years, and really enjoy analyzing China's entire tech ecosystem and understanding how it's similar and different from the West. And that's kind of what our podcast has been about, that Ade and I have been doing for a year and a half now. But we've been kind of trying to broaden it to Asia because China's just getting a little bit boring with all the crackdown, let's be honest. Ade?
Yeah, my name's Ade, and I am an American, but I'm living in China. I've been here for about 20 years, and it's been a long time. I've been running a software company here for a long time, and I also do some angel investing, work with founders, work with startups. And so Kevin and I have been talking a lot about what's been happening in China, and especially how the landscape has changed over the last 2 years as Beijing has been cracking down on the tech sector, and how that's affecting not just China, but also the global sort of tech community, and how that's shaping up, and how the trends here in China do tend to sort of affect and shape the rest of the world. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about that's been super clear right now is this idea of a super app, which just kind of burst into the scene with Elon Musk's comments. So, tell us a little bit about your app and why you decided to take this on, because it's a huge task, Robby.
Yeah, I'm going to start with your second question as to why I decided to take this on. And I think it's imperative that we continue to enhance the way that we communicate at a basic level. It's probably one of the most important problems that we need to continue to solve and improve and whatnot. It's it's fundamental to everything that we do. And it's very clear, like it goes without saying, based on you guys have used WeChat and whatnot, like the chats in the West aren't where they really need to be. And, you know, it became really clear to me that there was a lot of focus on what I would call like gimmicks, I guess you would say. Like if you think about
Right.
the biggest sort of innovations in chat over the last few years, you know, video calling kind of came out 2017, 2018. You know, it's just been stickers, you know, emojis, reactions. Like it's very, very like gimmicky is probably what the word I would put it down
Totally.
to. And look, after building a chat's really hard to build, and I take my hat off to some of these companies, but you know, they definitely have the resources to be expanding their products. And I think especially during COVID, the digital literacy of the average human enhanced dramatically. You know, you had parents jumping on Zooms and Microsoft Teams and people using Figma and all these things. Like people are much more digitally savvy than we sort of give them credit for. And so, yeah, I think it's time for an interesting product. It's in terms of the journey, it's an insane mission to sort of take on, and we've been told that from the start. But you know, you kind of build up enough momentum where it's almost harder to stop than to keep going. You know, you raise your first amount of money, you like start to build up your team and all those kind of things, and then you design it all in Figma, and you can see the end product, and you're like, wow, like this needs to exist. People need this, and then it almost becomes like a responsibility to do so. Just for everyone's context, really quickly, I'll just sort of give the high level of like what this app is. This app at a very fundamental level is a chat. So think of like, if you've never used WeChat, just think of like WhatsApp. But we're adding 3 new tools to it. So the first one being a calendar. So with the calendar, you'll be able to connect your Google and Outlook calendar. And the purpose of the calendar is so that you can create events directly in the chat. You don't need to exchange emails with your friends. You just create an event in the chat and it goes out to your preferred calendar. Or if you're not a calendar aficionado, you can just use this app's calendar. But for Google Calendar and Outlook users, I know, you know, you're probably getting anxious hearing someone offering another calendar. So we support you as well. But along with our calendar, we also have a trip feature. So you can also create trips in the app as well. So that's like a series of different events. So you could organize anything from like a Friday night dinner all the way up to like a Europe trip for 30 days. The second element is a payments platform. So you two know that WeChat is notorious from the impact of the wallet and whatnot. So we're going to sort of do a mix in the wallet where you'll actually be able to make payments, but also keep a running tab. So like very similar to Splitwise. What we're actually going to do to start with is sort of piggyback off the back of sort of Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal. So people will be able to put in their details and it'll sort of open up PayPal or Cash App or whatnot, just to build up that volume, because these platforms have generated so much traffic. Very different to when WeChat first started their wallet. They were sort of the first to the game. There's a big market in the US right now. And then last but not least is a booking service. So you're organizing these events, you're splitting payments with your friends and whatnot. The last part that we've got is a discovery feed where you can book hotels, book restaurants, book flights, cars, event tickets, and all of those things. So that's what we're working towards. Right now, we've got our chat beta out. We are planning on launching in September.
All right, Robby, thanks so much. That's really cool to hear about your product, the fundamental of it, and the product roadmap. I know. So I first, Robby reached out to me about a month ago, and we've had 2 calls. He's a bit of a product aficionado, always showing me all these different little products coming out of Silicon Valley and how they're going to make your life more efficient. And when you're talking about how communications and could be improved and it could actually just really benefit people and humans, I think that's kind of what you were saying. And I really agree with that. I really agree with that. And I think that there's so much value add to people that they don't realize that they could have just a much more efficient way of communicating, a much more efficient way of organizing things, of like lining up calendars, like you're saying, like events and booking and paying for things. And it's kind of Elon Musk. He kind of implied some of that, but he didn't say it clearly. He just goes, WeChat is really good in China. Nothing like that exists outside, and it should. And he goes, I don't care if it's turning Twitter or something existing into it or starting something new. This needs to be made outside. And Robby jumped on that and made a TikTok video. He goes, this needs to be made, and his app is called this. And he's like, he's saying that my app needs to be made, and has like Robbie, him, and his kind of colleague Oscar made a TikTok video that almost reached 1 million views of that.
Wow.
It was like their manifest destiny. It's like Elon Musk is calling upon them, and I think there's kind of this. I just think that there's at a fundamental philosophical level, there's nothing more powerful or more right than to create value for human beings. And I have a friend who's like thinking about making. He's kind of just made this little product that makes it easier to read content. And he's like, my dad's kind of saying, well, how are you going to monetize it? How are you going to get it out there? And I'm like, man, look, if you think people will benefit from it, just get whatever is your MVP, minimal viable product, and put it online. I'm like, he has another job and he's making money. I'm like, you're not really worried about money. Just see if people like it. Don't think about monetization and all this other stuff. You're like, he doesn't care about that. He just thinks maybe he should. And I'm like, a fundamental level, if you're creating value for humans, then that is good. And you're going to feel good about that. That's satisfying. And I think so. I like that Robbie kind of goes back to that fundamental level. He goes, I think chats and communication can be improved and more value can be created here. And I completely agree. Everything in the West, it just gets more gimmicky of adding GIFs and like little cat GIFs of like a cat mashing on a keyboard. And you add in the feature, the other big feature I've seen is like adding in, when you record a video, you can have like some AR, augmented reality kind of, you can look like a cat in the video and send that to each other. And it's fun and funny, but it doesn't really improve chats.
But like, don't get me wrong. I think it's good
Yeah.
to have gimmicks in that sense. But like, in addition to pure utility features, we've talked about WeChat being like a tool. It's not like gimmicks to try and get people staring at the app longer and whatnot. Whereas we can talk about this a little bit where WeChat's much more focused on like, it's a utility. It's you use WeChat for a purpose and then you sort of go back to your life. But I just wanted to address one thing with communication that I think is a bit undervalued is like, if you look at like the biggest innovations in human history over the last sort of like millennia, they all have like one thing in common. It's some of the biggest innovations, and they all reduce the amount of energy that it takes to transfer information. So the types of innovations I'm talking about are like the telegram, the telephone, the internet, even all the way through to cryptocurrency. And what each of those things are doing is it's reducing the amount of energy that it takes to transfer a given amount of information. Like obviously picking up the phone is much easier than, going to the post office and posting a letter. And when I say energy, it's, one person's energy or the collective society's energy. Like there's a huge amount of energy that needs to occur for a letter to, if I had to send a letter to Australia to tell Kevin something, for example.
Right.
And when you think about transferring information, what's become really interesting is as most things are moving from matter to bits, that includes money. Money is now bits as well now, where it's just information that's being transferred. So that means it can be sent through a chat. And even, like an event is just information that I'm sending you. So whether it's a text message, audio message, an event, $10, I'm just sending you information, which means a chat is highly capable of that. Like a chat is essentially just a information transmission machine.
Right.
And so the more we can make it where it takes less energy for us to transfer information between each other, the better. And we should continue doing that because there's a proven sort of record of success in terms of innovation in that domain, I guess you would say.
Yeah, that's
and
fantastic.
WeChat's shown that perfectly.
I like the way that you frame that. I have a question, just sort of, kind of comparing WeChat against this app and what your plans are for the future. I think one of the key features, I guess you could call it a feature, although it's not really a feature of the app itself. One of the reasons why WeChat has become such a powerful application is because there is sort of a monopoly going on, right? So
Yep.
everyone in China has WeChat. And what that has enabled is it's enabled this huge explosion of services built on top of WeChat as a platform. And I liken it very much to when Microsoft, was the default operating system for Office computers, and there was this huge explosion of Office productivity software. what WeChat has enabled in China is this huge, explosion of just utility and commerce that's built on top of WeChat. I'm wondering, for your app, do you see a way to achieve that kind of scale, or do you see a way to, or why doesn't that exist in the market in the US? Or if you had any
Yeah,
thoughts on that.
I think it's interesting, right? Like WhatsApp, for example, has more users than WeChat,
Yeah,
by about double, in that sense. Like WeChat's got, I think from last count that I'm aware of, is about a billion. If
yeah,
you look at like Facebook Messenger has about a billion, Telegram 600 million. Like, the rest of the world seems like WeChat's kind of just confined to China, but the rest of the world uses sort of all these other platforms. I'm pretty sure Snapchat has about 700 million, last time I counted. Oscar, can you double check those numbers? I'm pretty sure they're correct. But I might have been wrong on Snapchat. But I definitely think there's enough space in the market to scale. The other thing that you're absolutely right on is like WeChat has all these mini programs, and like companies have wanted to build on top of them and whatnot, and they've given enough reason. But I think once you're crossing 100 million users, like it's very likely that people are going to want to tap your audience, regardless of whether you have a monopoly or not. We're already able to get, we've already made partnerships with companies like Priceline and OpenTable and whatnot. And like, they have API partnerships, the APIs that we can essentially connect into, and they're looking to get traffic from anywhere and everywhere to just get more and more bookings, in that capacity. And, the more that we grow, we're going to get more opportunities to partner with different people. Do I think it's an easy run? Absolutely not. Is it
Right.
going to be hard to get people to move? 100%. But that's also why I wanted to focus on the event category, because the interesting thing is when WeChat first started, chat was interesting, right? Like chat was new, whereas now everybody sort of, no one wants to move chats anymore. Like everyone told you to move
yeah.
from WhatsApp to Signal, and if you tell your friend to move chats, they almost like delete you off their contact list now. So
Yeah. Good, nice
I
knowing you.
wanted, yeah, exactly. And so I wanted the events and the trips to be like a Trojan horse where, you get invited. If I said to you, hey, Ade, I'm organizing a ski trip, I've organized it on this app. If you want to go, you're going to download the app because I'm doing all the work. I'm organizing it. You're
Mhm.
just attending. You'll jump over there. And so I want the events and the trips to be a Trojan horse, but then it's up to us for people to land there and go, whoa, this is so much better than what I'm already using. It's got split payments, it's got events, it's got trips. I can book things, and then they'll start to learn, and it's what at the once we have those feature sets in there, I think it's going to be so remarkable that people are going to be like, this is so different to everything that I've used to date, that you'll get that sort of word of mouth effect as well. But it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be one of those sort of overnight you have 100 million users. It might, but I'm not entering the race thinking that,
Right, right.
in that sense. So, but I definitely think there is room for scale. Like, there's 7 or 8 major chat platforms in the US that have over 100 million users each. So there's, in, US and around the world, from, whatever, iMessage, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, um, all huge businesses, in that sense. So there's definitely a space for it there. But it's a good question. It's something we think about a lot.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, Robbie, when you first connected with me and I looked you up on LinkedIn, your description of this app, what was that? It's a one line and it's something like the chat that can do anything and organize anything. What's the line again?
No, you hated it, which has made me
No, no, no,
I've
no.
gone back from it a little bit, but it's connect with anyone and organize anything.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
it's funny. At first, I go, that's too much. I was like, what's your product positioning when you're like, I'll connect with anyone and organize anything? That's too much. But when you go on your app when I go on your app, what I guess what I've seen too common. So I'm like trying to take a step back from just talking about this app, but also just super apps in general in the West. What I'm seeing
Yeah,
too commonly is big companies go, we want to make a super app, and they just take a pile of services and content, throw it all together, and then say this is a super app. And it's like
yeah,
with when you don't have clarity of a value proposition as a user, as a user and as a potential user. Like as a potential user, you're like, well, what would I use it for? If I can do everything on it, I kind of can't do anything because I can't really figure out what to do. And
Yeah.
then once you start using it, you also, when you're already a user, you're kind of unclear of what direction to go. But then so yeah, when I saw connect with anyone and organize anything, I'm like, well, if you can do everything, you also like almost like can't do anything. But then when I see the app, you've organized it in my mind around kind of like three key pillars, and you kind of mentioned that pretty well, and that's basically calendar, and so you can align calendars and do scheduling really easily with other people within the context of a chat. Two is
Yeah.
payments, really easily split the bill, share peer-to-peer payments, and split the bill and pay for things. And then three is just general communication, where you have all that basics of chatting, sharing documents, videos, like whatever all that already exists in chats. But then you've just added in calendar connections, so all scheduling is kind of taken care of. Added in payments and made that really easy. And I then start to see, especially when you have the calendar, and then you're going to have a bunch of API integrations, I'm sure, because you're such a product nutter. Then I start to see, okay, I see how this works. And you start on the foundation of chats, calendars, and payments are one united thing. And you're actually like connect with anyone, communicate with them, organize anything, and also pay for anything. Um,
Yeah,
and so,
but when I think about like organized payments sort
yeah,
of tie into that,
right.
and what you said is absolutely correct. Like I see this with a lot of apps that may or may not be competitors of ours. Like people just kind of bolt on features and they don't actually interweave.
Yeah,
What's taken us a fair amount of time to build is like when you create an event, it you press the button in the chat, it adds everyone in the chat, and then it goes into your calendar. It saves in your chat history. It goes to your Google Calendar. We like one of our older taglines was kind of like in sync. We've worked really hard to tie it. You can link payments to events, link events to chats, and there's a lot of like linking to the point where we've almost had times where we've almost tied our own shoelaces together, like in that sense, because we're trying to wrap everything in together so well. It's really hard to do. It takes a lot of thought because there's so many edge cases that you have where you can trip over yourself in that sense. And once you start thinking, Ade, you work with a lot of software engineers. I think once you start thinking of edge cases, your brain never comes back from there. But it's a certain method, a certain way of thinking. But Kevin, I'd love to dive in a bit more as well about you've been generous talking about this app a lot, talking about like your book as well, and what you think about WeChat's super apps in the
right,
West. Personally, I just want to sort of like highlight WeChat is inspiration for us, but we're not overly influenced by
right.
it. I think the West definitely works different to the East. You wouldn't be able to just copy and paste the product and it would just work. In that sense, the West is very, very different from like UI design to UX to like how everything works and how apps need to be sort of structured and all of these kind of things. So the inspiration I've taken is more feature facilitating revenue
Mm,
is what WeChat does better than everybody else. Like
mm,
their revenue diversification is incredible.
right.
And they've been able to squeeze so much juice out of each of their feature sets without having to rely on advertising, which the West relies on so deeply. I think Facebook's at like 98% revenue, advertising revenue, whereas WeChat's I think it's like 12.
Right.
So that's what's impressed me the most.
Well, great. Robby, yeah, no, good segue. I was gonna try to I'm like, well, we don't want to go too hard on our this app sell, but I do think it's a killer app, and it's so cool to see because even me that I think about this stuff. How do we do a WeChat? How do we make like an amazing communication super app in the West? And even I, the amazing, out there thinker, I read your byline, connect with anyone, and organize anything. And I can't imagine how you can do that in a simple app. And then now that I've seen your app, I'm like, wow, it feels inevitable. You're just like, oh, these three key pillars: chats, calendar, payments, all really easily linked, all a part of the chat box. And it's really clear once I see how you organize it. Now I'm like, wow, this is so easy. So I'm really
Everyone always says, "What's our roadmap?" And I'm like, "It's on our toolbar."
yeah, yeah.
Like I say to the team, it's like we build the chat, then
It's
we
so
build the
easy.
organized thing, then we build the wallet.
It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
easy.
So
And it's really cool. So I'm excited about that.
in
But
theory,
I
I'll
also
put it that way. It's definitely not easy to
oh,
build, but yeah.
but once you see it, I'm like, yeah. But that's good innovation. Is like once you see it, it feels inevitable. You're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But man, there's a lot that goes into that,
Thank you.
and I've kind of see that with WeChat. You're like, oh, of course it's got to be there. But then there's a lot of thought that goes into that. So yeah, but I want to take a step back, and I want to take a little step back and think about not just about WeChat, but then like I like to Ade and I kind of like to peg it to current our kind of chats to current events, and that current event is one Elon Musk backing out of the Twitter deal, and he was going to make it
Yep.
into a super app. So then what is that? And then I was just quoted, or like Wall Street Journal just did a article on what the heck is a super app and why is Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey going crazy about it. And I was quoted in there a lot because I talked to the writer, and he was just kind of baffled. He's like, "What?" He actually, and this I think this is fine to say. It's kind of just funny. This whole thing is super apps. It's become this buzzword that every CEO knows about, but no one really gets. The guy that wrote that, Christopher Mims, goes, "Yeah, one of my chiefs told me I had to write this article. It wasn't I think he normally gets to think of what he wants, but he's like it's a top down. This some CEO or some chief within Wall Street Journal goes, you need to write about super apps," which is I thought was really funny because I've talked to a lot of companies around the world, and it's their CEOs saying, "Hey, make a super app," and then they come find me as a consultant, and they go, "Okay, we need to make one." And then I go, "Well, do you have an idea of what a super app is?" And they go, "Not really," and um, and it's been fun writing the book in a way because it is just it's this pop buzzword in the West. It's an amorphous kind of abstract concept, and what is it? And I thought what was kind of fun when I was talking to the guy Christopher Mims from Wall Street Journal is I just kind of had this realization the day before I chatted with him, and as I go, there is no word for super app in Chinese. Super app is a word that describes WeChat and what they've accomplished, but it doesn't exist as a word. And Ade and I were talking about as well in our podcast, in our last podcast, and we're like, and super app is just like this concept for the West to try to understand what the heck it is that WeChat has accomplished.
Right.
And so I think the first kind of question is, and Robby, I want to hear your take on this, is what is a super app to you? And we just kind of chat
I just
that
had a
out.
thought that I'd never thought of before, which I think you'll enjoy before I define super app in my own way. I don't really have a crystal clear definition, but I'll elaborate. But I was just thinking, like, I actually hate the word super app personally. But what I was thinking of is, like, I think it's similar to the word smartphone. Like, you know how we don't say smartphone anymore? Like, I just think, like, in the field, like, it'll just be phones and apps. Like, I think it's just interesting at the moment because it's new and novel. So you have to chuck a superpowered word on the front, in the sense, like,
right.
It's not a phone, it's a smartphone. Like, it's not an
Right.
app, it's a super app. And there's a lot of synergies between a smartphone and a super app, like, in that way. Like, it's sort of like the natural progression of that. I have a pretty interesting view on super apps. I think they're sort of underestimated. I think super apps are multi-platform apps, rather than multi-featured apps. So I would summarize it in a very simple sentence as like a multi-platformed app with a diverse revenue stream. That's probably how I would put it in a sentence. What I mean by multi-platform is it's not like I've got Instagram and now I can buy a dress from the photo. It's like I've got a chat and I put YouTube and Facebook inside it. In that sense, like, it's much bigger than that. In that sense, and when we're talking about super apps with this app, like, we're not there today and we won't be there tomorrow. Like, it's going to take us a while to build up to that extent, but we've laid the framework to actually build a super app from, like, the infrastructure level all the way up. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not saying that we are a super app as of this date today, but we've set our framework and our structure to head in that direction. And we've already laid out we understand what the product's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. So I think that's an important thing for people, because sometimes people could just bolt things on trying to be a super app, and just bolting a couple of extra features on is not what a super app is. It's sort of multi-platform. in that capacity is, and when you look at WeChat, you've got Moments, which is essentially like Facebook.
Right.
What's the
Facebook wall.
YouTube one that they've got in there now?
Channels. It's
Channels,
supposed
yeah.
to be like TikTok.
TikTok, yeah. So like you open WeChat, you've got Facebook, you've got TikTok in there. You've got
Right.
WhatsApp in there. You've got
Yep.
Venmo in there. So
Yes.
like it's multi-platform, not multi-featured. I think
Right.
people too often think it's multi-featured. It's more than that.
I like that. Ade, what's your take?
Yeah, it is funny the way the way that the word super app has just kind of snowballed. I think of it like a snowball. I mean, maybe 2 3 years ago, it was just kind of this novelty word, and then about a year ago, especially in the investment circles, everyone was pitching, oh, this is a super app for Latin America, this is a super app for Southeast Asia, this is a super app for you know uh, Southern Africa. And everyone was just investing. Like you put super app on your pitch deck, and investors are like, yeah, let me get in, because they see
Yeah.
the success of WeChat. They see what Grab and Gojek were able to accomplish in Southeast Asia. They see what Line is doing in East Asia, and there definitely is a lot of value that can be created when you, like you said. I really like that idea of it's a multi-platform app. And so a single app has many features, but those features don't necessarily all bring in revenue. But when you have different platforms together, like Google has YouTube as a platform, and Google has the search as a platform, and Gmail as a platform, and they each have their own different revenue streams. um, and so, yeah, putting them all into one single app, that's what WeChat has been able to do. um, and
But
that,
just like
that's a good
just sorry to
definition.
interrupt
Yeah,
you.
let's go ahead.
Just like the iPhone, it's more than the sum of its parts, right? Like
Mhm.
when you start to when I put events into this app, for example, when you do a booking, we can take all the information from the hotel, automatically create an event for you, send it in the chat, and then send it to the calendar. It's kind of like, the iPhone isn't just like a compass, an internet browser, and a phone. It's not that. Like when you combine these things together, you get these brand new products that you've never been able to create before, because you can like interweave them into revolutionary new products. Like in that sense, that's what's kind of cool about it. When you connect these platforms together, you can do really interesting things.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
absolutely.
just want to take a moment, like just after Audie's sharing, and as you're staring at his muscles, I just wanted to explain. This is the first time we've done video, and Guangzhou is a very warm place, and Audie is not just trying to show you his muscles. It's very, very warm and very humid. So
Yes,
I
yes.
just want to explain that. I just wanted to digress for a second. Um, Okay, yeah, I'm gonna pull up my book. I have a video now, so I can show people
Yeah.
things. Yeah,
Give
really good attempt, Robbie and Ade. Thank you, students, for your contribution. Some of you guys were close, but not the right answer. No, I'm totally joking.
Can you? What's your definition? I'm actually
No, I
curious.
know. I'm like, oh, do you want the answer, students? Do you want the answer? No, I actually don't have my definition. I'll go to my definition, but I think both Ade and Robbie are just touching on some really important points that I mostly have missed. I really like Robbie's point about, I think multi-platform is a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
My definition that I cover in the book, and I just like sat back and thought long and hard about it, and I got something I think is, I have something better than most of the definitions out there, but still not complete. And I think super app is it's so amorphous, so abstract, and it's defining a concept. It's translating a concept from Chinese that doesn't even have a word for it. So then it's like translating nothing, and it's just such a bastardized word right now. Um, but anyways, my definition is, the simple definition is it's an app that everyone's using to do everything, is what I use. And
Mm.
it's kind of it's a cop out definition because it doesn't really say anything. So then I use my more technical definition is a lot of users, so that's everyone's using it to do everything that's content that businesses are making, or also people. And then you have tools that make the interactions more efficient.
Hmm.
And that's what I like Robbie talking about, trying to make a communication application that's more efficient. And that's like having calendar payments, having events, and just making it easier for people to interact and do things, and then even buying things. So just those are tools. And then finally, the fourth part. So it's like users, content, tools, and the fourth part is platform. That's the only way. Only when you have a platform can you reach any type of significant quantity in users or in content. Because if you just that's what I'm saying as a problem with a lot of businesses saying they're making a super app and they're just throwing all their stuff into one place. But it's only like when Robby's talking about this app, it's only when you go, this app now has a platform so that all these businesses can put their events on here. Then you start having thousands of events and millions of events, and it's not just Robby kind of calling up, like triple or Priceline or whatever, and putting things in individually into this app. It's a platform, and now people can plug in and put their events, can plug in, put things that you can buy, e-commerce. You have offline to online, so that people can take this app and then go to a restaurant and then order off the menu. Then you start having a platform. That's when you really start having a significant amount of content, and it's only the platform that I can think of, because that's the only way to get such a mass amount of content, businesses, services on there to make it a quote unquote super app. But that's my really basic definition. I really like your multi-platform because I think the platform strategy is that key to reach that. But then I really agree with you that, and that's when I talk about my book, I just say users and content, but then I try to say breadth and depth of either of them. If your app, you have a platform, but all you have is a bunch of different shoe brands, and all you do is sell shoes. Well, that's really cool. You have like every type of, you have Nike, Adidas, Asics. You have all the Brooks. You have all these different shoes, and you have a lot of different sellers. So then they can compete on. You can get the best value because they're all competing. But you just don't have the breadth. You're just doing shoes. You're not doing all types of retail, and then you're all just only doing retail. You're not doing like all of e-commerce, and then you can again broaden that to services where you're getting legal and whatever services. Then you can broaden it to things that you don't even buy, like free event retreats, and that's kind of what some of the things that Robby might be getting into. That's the multi-platform where you don't just go for one scenario or one kind of type of transaction. That's where, and I really agree with that. I say platform, but I really like the idea of even saying from that platform, multi-platform, so you're getting different groups of services in different groups of users.
I think just quick one that I was thinking about is like what you're talking a lot about is like the mini app side of WeChat. And I think what WeChat does really smart is like, and this is kind of the mentality that we're taking at this app and that I've learned from WeChat is like, they understand that they're the tool, right? And so their job is to build the useful tool. Like why mini apps was so important, and just for everyone's context, like a mini app is kind of like it's almost like a web page, a mini app inside WeChat where imagine booking.com, you can book a hotel or whatever. But what was really smart was they were like, we're the best at making the tool, right? Booking.com, you're the best at getting hotel inventory. Okay. We can make a better tool that your hotel inventory can plug into. And like, what's really smart about mini apps is like, they take these, what's called like long tail apps. And a long tail app is like an app that you might use once every month, once every 2 months. Like, I don't know, the KFC app or the booking.com app or whatever. You never use it, right?
KFC app maybe every day for me, but yeah.
but like, for whatever those sort of things is like why mini apps are so smart is like I can go into, let's use KFC for this example. In China, I can go into KFC. I can open the mini app inside WeChat. I don't need to download the app, create an account, log in, and I can order my food. KFC benefits, WeChat benefits, but what WeChat probably does better
the user
than most
benefits.
And what WeChat does better than most companies in the West is like they partner better, like with other companies, and there's a much more intertwined relationship between like, hey, we're the tool, we'll add enormous amounts of value to your users, and and we'll partner together, and we'll become stronger as a result of that. So I think that's really cool that they do. I do have a question for you both because I have a contrarian view on this. Do you think that there's super apps in the West?
That's a good question.
Ooh. I have actually, Ade, you go ahead. I just spoke.
Well, I just wanted to actually I wanted to before I answer that question, I wanted to just jump back about how Robby was saying that WeChat taps into the long tail. I think you don't need like the it does long tail doesn't even begin to describe the WeChat mini program ecosystem. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like every business, niche business who has 7 customers can start their own. I mean, it very much is much more akin to a web page than an
Yeah.
app. Because they made it so easy, and it is basically based on HTML and JavaScript.
And a
So,
lot of startups release their like first MVP and stuff like that as mini
oh, yeah,
apps,
I
right?
mean, at this
Totally.
point,
Yeah.
actually, pretty much you don't need to build an app. You don't need to build an
Yeah.
Android or an iPhone app, iOS app in China, unless you get to the multi-million scale.
Yeah.
Because
And
before that, you can grow your business, you can grow your user base within these platforms.
I,
Um,
Robbie's actually the second guest we've had on our podcast. The first was Leon, which is Audie's friend.
oh
That
yeah,
I just had a call with. I just had a call with Audie this weekend to organize this, and he was having a barbecue with Leon
yeah.
at
Who does a
Leon's
lot of
place. And let's just. I just want to. I don't want to like. I don't want to say too much, but let's just say Leon's doing pretty well. Okay,
yeah.
let's. He's got like a Tesla or two. Things are going well for Leon. And Leon
From building mini
owns.
apps.
Yes,
Oh,
he runs and
interesting.
owns a developer company, and he used to make apps, and now his company just does mini apps, and things are going well for him. So you can really be successfsuper on
For sure.
just being a developer of mini apps.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in terms of in the West, whether or not a super app exists, um, and yeah, I mean, from my perspective, especially coming from China, whenever I go back to visit the West or visit the home in the U.S., which I haven't done for a very long time, but I do get frustrated. I get frustrated because things are much less convenient.
Yeah.
Last time I was in the States, I actually I kept forgetting. I kept leaving my wallet at home because
I do
in
that all
China,
the time.
yeah, I
Yeah,
literally, I stopped carrying a wallet around about 5 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
and so and I use my phone for everything. I use my phone for payments, for it just 100%. I mean, 100%. Right? There's a zero cash, zero credit card, 100% on the phone, and actually that is 100% WeChat, like 100% payments. Anything that I need to do, I do it on WeChat, and yeah, I mean, in the States, I forgot my wallet at home, and I like, well, I can use Apple Pay, but maybe, in some places I can't.
Yeah.
And so I got it really, really turned around. And yeah, so I mean, just sort of by that definition, it doesn't
You
exist. Yeah.
okay? You're going no. Okay. What about you, Kevin?
so I was luckily just. I'm so glad I have a notepad in front of me because I just got all these ideas coming out. So I want to go a little bit on the definition, a little bit more on what is a super app, and then go to the question on
Sure.
okay, now that we know what it is one does one exist in the West? Because that it's so important to kind of sit on that definition for a while because a lot of people jump to like okay, we got it, let's make one, or like let's define what is and what isn't. And something I think Robbie's done a good job of just kind of analyzing WeChat because I think everyone needs to remember that WeChat is the like super app describes WeChat. And it's so funny. People are going, so is WeChat a super app? And they kind of ask me that. I'm like, look, super app is just a word to describe WeChat. There's no like, there is no other way to define super app really. It's just a word to describe what WeChat has accomplished. Um, and that what WeChat has accomplished is important because I
It's
see
like
super app.
Uber. Uber describes ride sharing. Like, what is ride? Uber is ride
Yeah,
sharing. Like, that's what
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or yeah, like almost like search with Google.
Yeah.
It's like it is like people use Google to mean search the internet.
Yeah.
Although I mean something existed before Google for searching the internet, but it's the definitive thing. Like WeChat is the first thing, and like super app is a way to try to understand what they've accomplished. And so, but I want to kind of note that what they have accomplished, super app for me is a bit of a milestone. It's you are a super app when you've done all of these things, and that's
Hmm.
where it's like everyone's using it and you're doing everything. So it's a bit of a milestone. I think you can have a super app strategy where you're
Correct.
trying to do things to reach that milestone, but it's kind of like a destination or a place that you reach.
Yeah.
And there's an important reason to say that is that I want to kind of go back to that. I like what Robby was saying, how like a super app, it has a lot of different platforms, has a lot of different tools is kind of what I say as well. And how like WeChat has official accounts, that's where businesses chat with users, and then mini programs, that's where businesses give their services to users, and they're like really similar in a way. Mini programs is this upgraded version of business accounts, more complex, higher barrier, more development necessary, but it's still a little bit different. And then you have channels, you have all these other things. And a lot of the existing definition for a super app, kind of before I came in with this book, is just that a super app is an app with mini apps on it, and that just describes mini programs. And that's why I really like Robby saying about multi-platform, because I think that's wrong. I don't think my definition is holistic yet, and I think it could be improved. But I think WeChat as a super app is not described by having mini programs. It hits like 20%, 25%. It's a really important and impressive feature, but it's not the end all be all. I think WeChat was actually pretty much a super app before mini programs came out. Mini programs really solidified it. But there's a few things there. One is that if mini programs came out at the beginning of WeChat's journey, I don't think it would have been successful. And I don't even think WeChat would have been successful. Mini programs are a tool to increase the efficiency of content interacting with users. But like I said, compared to official accounts, they're a high barrier. It takes a lot of development. It's a hard sell to convince businesses to make a mini program, an official account, or sorry,
it took 3 years
a mini program.
They really took off.
Yeah, totally. And when I was on the WeChat's marketing team when mini program came out, we definitely had to do a lot of groundwork. And this is where Robby could really talk about being an entrepreneur running an app. The amount of biz dev, marketing, selling that you have to do to sell concepts, like a new concept. Mini program now, everyone's trying to copy it and do it. But when it was first coming out, it was this complete novelty in China and pretty much in the world. And we had to convince like 200, 300 businesses to jump on it and develop them. And they're like, we don't know what it is. 1, 2, we don't have that kind of development resources. And there was a lot of selling that we had to do. And in the first year, a lot of people thought, in the first actually 6 months, there was a lot of criticism. A lot of people thought mini program was a bust. They go, look, why would we make apps within WeChat when we can like just make them on iOS and Android? They're like a little bit like, what is it called, like hamstrung. They're not as there's not as many services in the mini program that you could have in a full-fledged app.
I think a good cross analogy that people would probably be able to understand is like, and what you're essentially saying, and it's absolutely true, is you have to build the tool before you can build the platform. And I think a lot of people forget this. Like, you need to build a tool that's really, really useful. People like that tool, they start using it, then you can start to build a platform on top of that. But a good analogy,
totally perfect.
A good analogy is like the App Store, right? Like the iPhone didn't have the App Store on day one. Like they had to release the iPhone, the tool. People started using it, and it took a long time for people to really build apps. It took, for the App Store to become what it is today, like 15 years.
Yeah.
Like, people didn't just start building apps. They were like, no, why would I use an app? Like, I use my computer. Like, it's too much work for a business to build an app. There's like businesses that still don't have apps, like in that sense. And, so that's where that would be a good cross analogy for people to understand. Like, it's only now that a lot of companies have started, or not now, maybe in the last like 5 years, that a lot of companies have started to adopt that.
I remember the first app I used was with a smartphone was the light bulb, the flashlight app. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is a flashlight. This is fantastic. And that was like the only I was like, I don't see why you would need an app for anything else, but this flashlight app is really convenient. And now that's just a little feature like in there. But yeah, so like Gojek self-describes as a super app. And on their blog, they describe what a super app is. And I think Robby's done a great job with this app. He's got like he comes from the crypto world. So he has like all these white papers and all this. He goes into the defining things. And and I don't see Gojek doing that as much. But they have a blog and they describe a super app, and they go, a super app is an umbrella app with a lot of mini apps inside of it, and I just completely disagree. I just think that's really missing the mark. And it was kind of surprising to me because yeah, they just say they're a super app, and that's like a big part of their identity. Um, and so I think the people that are going, okay, we want to make a super app, so I'm going to make an app with a kind of an operating system of mini apps, and that's my super app. I'm just going to put it out there. That is doomed to fail. The reason why WeChat's mini programs worked is because they had an insane amount of momentum,
Yeah.
and they had so much leverage of 600 million users with payment connected, already using it for like a Facebook wall kind of moments feature, all these other things. And that all this push, that's the only way that, with that high barrier, they could get businesses to come on. So
I
I
think
think,
there's an
yeah,
interesting,
go ahead.
like, because you use Gojek, like I was going to say the closest super app I've probably seen in the West is Uber. Uber,
Yeah,
they're doing, you can rent bikes, you can buy food, you can do your grocery shopping, you can now, you can order an Uber, you can rent a car, you can buy a train ticket, you can buy your bus ticket. Um,
yeah,
they're also allowing you to book restaurants now, on Uber. So about Uber's, they've got kind of everything except the chat, at this stage. They're still quite far, but they're probably the closest. But there is a trend in the West with super apps being very e-commerce and e-commerce based and food delivery service orientated. Like if you look at like Grab and
that's
Gojek
so
and stuff,
true.
like they're all centered around like delivering stuff.
Yeah.
Totally,
In that sense, someone was saying to me the other day that
100%.
it was I think it was Postmates, and they were like, "Yeah, Postmates is becoming a super app. Like, they've been delivering food, now they're delivering flowers." And I was like, "Okay, but
Mm.
like,
Super app, boom.
what's that?"
That and then now it's a definitive super app is
Yeah,
like
That's a bit
yeah,
of a
deliver
stretch, if you
food
ask me.
and flowers.
yeah. But it's an interesting thing. Like, there's this big focus on the delivery apps becoming super apps, like in that way, which is kind of like Grab and Gojek seem to have kickstarted that trend because they called themselves um, super apps,
Super
but
apps.
they're very e-commerce orientated. Like, I think that's one thing that a lot of people get confused with WeChat. WeChat's not hyper e-commerce orientated. Like, it has a lot of e-commerce on it, but it's not
Totally.
the primary use of it. Like, it's
I
just one of the uses.
at WeChat, I was directed by our lawyers at WeChat and Tencent to say that WeChat is not an e-commerce platform. We
Okay,
were
yeah,
legally obliged to say that. We're like,
yeah,
we are
yeah.
not. WeChat is not a e-commerce platform. So yeah, I think Robbie, what you're saying is spot on. What I kind of want to say with that is that yeah, the mini program is not the end all be all for a super app. It's a much more complex fundamental aspect. I love the multi-platform approach or like concept, and I think super app is again, it's a milestone. It's a milestone where you get, and then the super app strategy is a journey, which is why, to borrow a crypto term, is like I'm bullish on this app as a super app
Thank you.
because you're starting from a clear, strong anchor service, and that's what I think super apps do. You start from this really a strong, what you said, tool and anchor service, and then you slowly add on peripheral services, and in a lot commonly in platforms, and you slowly bring them on, and you keep a clear product position, a clear value proposition, so users know, okay, this app or whatever super app is, WeChat is a chat app, but hey, I can also chat with my friends and be like, hey, let's buy these shoes, and then I can buy them. Like you stay
But this is the most
clear.
important part of where we took our inspiration from WeChat is what you're saying, where the chat is so important because you've got this high velocity, low margin product, right? And you
Right,
combine it with these high margin, low velocity products, and it makes a really powerful tool in that sense. Like, that's why the chat's so important because it's so high velocity.
totally.
Like, people are
Yeah.
using it all day, every day, and if you can, that's why that's what I think what WeChat's got so different to everybody else, and why they have way more volume than some of these other apps, is because you don't order food or use or order an Uber anywhere near the amount that you message people. Like, in that sense, the velocity is so much higher. So you've got more and more people using it much more often, and the viral effect of it, like WeChat's much more multiplayer. Like a chat is multiplayer. Like delivering food and ordering a taxi isn't really like a multiplayer activity. It's not overly viral in that nature.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that you're mentioning back in when you're talking about Gojek and how they describe themselves as a super app, and Grab especially. Um, I mean, I think I'm maybe sort of refining my definition of super app and what makes them useful. And what occurred to me was that when I started seeing Grab as a super app is when I was visiting Thailand, and I noticed that they had added Grab Pay to Grab. And
Yeah.
so this idea of having a wallet and then taking people who are using that wallet to, theoretically you're using your wallet sort of daily, booking a car, paying for your ride, when you can then take that out and start to pay for, pay at 7-Eleven, send money to friends, pay your house cleaner with the app, and then they then can use it to book their own rides and order their own food and pay for things at 7-Eleven. It really kind of revolves around the wallet, and the wallet is one of those high velocity things where if you can get to a point where your payment method is one of the default payment methods that people are using around town, um, then you definitely that's that high velocity product. You're using it multiple times a day, every day. In addition to the chat, I mean, almost to the point where, I mean, for me personally, I mean, I'm a very, very heavy WeChat user, right? Because I'm living in China. I have to say, like, I actually get annoyed at WeChat sometimes because there's so much in it.
Right.
Like, let's say I'm having a chat with some friends trying to plan, having dinner over here, but then I also want to, rent a bike. And so I have to then hop out of the mini program for the bike, then to go reply to my friend over here, and it's all in WeChat. And then I have to go pay for something, and then I also open up WeChat to pay for something.
Yeah.
So like I'm just opening up WeChat in different parts of WeChat.
That's kind of like what I was talking about before,
Yeah.
about like tying your shoelaces together. You start to like trip over yourself because like the user can't. You cause a lot of friction, but it's going to be it's going to
Oh
be
my gosh,
interesting in the. It's
I
going to
did
be
not
interesting
get
in
that. I didn't get that reference at first. I just realized you mean like tying the shoelaces of two shoes
and
together.
falling
I
over.
was
Correct.
like,
Yeah,
I'm
and you
sorry.
start to like
That
you
was
start to trip
wow.
over your own
Yeah,
feature
that
sets
makes
where it
sense. I was
becomes
like,
unusable.
yeah,
But what I was
yeah.
just going to say quickly to what Ade was saying was like the only interesting thing about the West is like Apple Pay and Apple Wallet is so powerful. So like the super apps are going to look a little bit different in the West because I don't really see anyone being able to make a better wallet than Apple. Like they've got it at the hardware level and it's freaking amazing. Like
it is.
when you use Apple Pay, it's incredible. So it's going to be interesting to see how I'm pretty confident that Apple will start to open up their like wallet APIs and you'll be able to like plug the wallet into your app and like all those kind of things. So those things will come over time. But I think you're absolutely right about the importance of the wallet.
I think
So
it's
I want
actually.
to Oh, go ahead,
Sorry,
Ade.
I was
Sorry.
just gonna really quickly. It's been really interesting for me here as an avid Apple user, and as soon as Apple Wallet came out, I signed up for it. And they actually released Apple Wallet in China. You can add your Chinese bank cards to Apple Wallet. And about 2-3 years ago, when Apple Wallet first came out, a lot of businesses in China had Apple Pay. Especially at places like Starbucks, those international places. But there was just a head-to-head competition between Apple Pay and WeChat Pay and Alipay, and Apple Pay was so much easier to use. I mean, it's built into the hardware. You double click, you tap, you're done. Whereas with WeChat Pay, Alipay, you have to open your phone, scan a code, wait for the code to load, click OK, put in your password. I mean, it's like 4 steps instead of 2. But I mean, there's no more Apple Pay anymore. It doesn't exist.
I think
in China,
just because of the ubiquity, because Apple Pay only works with Apple devices.
Totally.
Yeah, Ade, I think that is a fantastic point about what you're saying about Apple Pay. And like, even though Apple Pay came out, everyone still was using WeChat's wallet. I think there's 2 reasons for this. One is obviously WeChat, they were already just used to using WeChat's wallet and it worked really well already. And like Apple Pay was like late to the market where Apple Pay is the primary one in the West. But you know what is interesting about Apple Pay is like it's not really used as a payment transfer tool that often. From what I understand, most people don't use Apple
Right.
Pay through their iMessage too often, which is
Very
kind of interesting. And I
frequently.
think the reason for this is, I think for payments to work really well, they have to be nested inside the content creation process. And what I mean by that is like, if you think about like a red packet, the payment nests beautifully inside that
Yeah.
content
Right.
creation process. For us, if you create an event or you're paying for a booking or something, like there's a payment that gets nested inside that content. And I think WeChat did a really, really good job of this. Whereas like when you go to iMessage, there's no like the payments don't sit inside the content creation process. So like you don't think of paying there. Like in that sense, like you can pay in Facebook chat. And I've stayed in, uh, I've had share houses where you have like roommates and stuff like that, and you always just PayPal them, even though you could have just paid directly through the chat, because you don't have a relationship with these platforms where they have like payments nested inside their like content and their other feature sets. Like payments is kind of just this feature set that they just bolt it on and it doesn't do anything else. Like in that sense, it's just
Right.
like, hey, we have payments, but whereas like WeChat has red packets and you can pay your phone bill and like they have all these sort
Mhm.
of additional features that actually make you think, hey, when I make a payment, I go to WeChat, like in that sense. And I think that's been a really important force in their sort of like product development process. It's been really smart.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I got a few things to say on this because this is really interesting. Is I was a part of WeChat, or like I was working at WeChat as payments were expanding, and we were going global. Because so WeChat introduced WeChat Pay around, I think it was like early 2014, and
Yep.
it was about 5, even maybe even 10 years after Alipay. So Alipay had this huge first mover advantage. Alipay was very well established,
Good
but
guess. It
even
was June
before
2014. I have a roadmap in my notes,
there
but
you
yeah.
go.
Yeah.
So even before I kind of chat about that, like put a little earmark on that, and we're gonna go back to it. It's actually a dog mark on that. We're gonna go back to that. Is talking about Alipay and their approach to their expansion is Alipay, Apple Pay, and their expansion is their. I really like what Robbie says. Like their user experience in Apple Pay is just so perfect, yet it's very limited, and it's a little bit too perfect. Like
Yeah.
Audie is saying, it's like it's really easy. You just do this, and then you scan, face scan or something, and then you pay at the POS machine. And it's a really nice user experience, but it's so limited because you can only really pay at the POS. And now they have messaging, but that came out later. And when WeChat Pay was expanding globally, and I was a part of that, it was uh, Apple Pay required an NFC chip or an NFC reader.
That's the key. Yeah.
Um,
Hardware.
if in order to accept Apple Pay. Whereas WeChat Pay or Alipay was that QR code.
Yeah.
Yes, 3 steps instead of like 2 or 1, but an NFC reader at the time, and this is like about 6 years ago, cost about 5,000 RMB, which is about $1,000 US. And then you had to integrate it with your hardware, and in some time you had to have this whole kind of setup for it. Whereas to accept WeChat Pay or Alipay, you needed to print a QR code,
Right.
which was potentially
Zero.
10 cents.
Yeah.
And so there are pictures even in 2018 of beggars with a QR code, and they go, "You can't pay in cash here. Scan this, and then you can pay me." And they would walk around with 2 QR codes, an Alipay and a WeChat Pay. But then less kind of extreme wet markets where you go through a farmer's market, a wet market, or you're just buying bananas, buying oranges, buying fresh fish. They have their QR codes hanging above their stall, and then you just reach up and scan it. That talking about, like Robbie is kind of talking about, that long tail. Once you have wet markets, every single person peddler selling things on the street. It was at the
Yep.
entrance of WeChat one day. The guy didn't even know WeChat was. He was standing in front of the headquarters WeChat HQ, but a guy literally had bananas that he was selling on the back of his bike. And I talked to him. He's like, works at a farm in the jungle outside of Guangzhou, and he had bananas and then a WeChat QR code. And I was like, "Do you know that you are at the front of WeChat headquarters?" And he goes, "I have no idea. I don't even." He's like, he didn't really understand the concept. He's like, "What's a headquarters?" But I got a photo with him, and it was.
Headquarters. Love that.
He's like, "What's a headquarters?" It was such an interesting concept, and I think what I want to now compare that to the idea of the mini program. Is the mini program, it's high barrier but it's a great platform for really highly efficient, smooth interactions between businesses and users. Apple has this really high barrier to entry payment method to interact with users, but it was 5,000 renminbi to get in, where the other one's 10 renminbi. So it's $1,000 versus 10 cents. And WeChat Pay and Alipay just spread like crazy, where you're paying for any ma and pa shop pays 10 cents, and then they have their QR code to accept payment, and then they pay another like $2, and then they're now have, I mean, they're just accepting it as a cash replacement, and then they kind of can be integrated into some more business official system, and have an more official QR code. But payments is all set up. You even had, Ade, you remember this, like even before taxi companies could accept WeChat Pay and Alipay, you'd be in a taxi, you wouldn't have cash, you maybe wouldn't want to pay with a credit card. Every taxi would have just 2 QR codes that would pay cash directly to them. Then they would pay the taxi company. So
they still do that.
That's
they never
where it doesn't. And that's where it doesn't make sense to jump straight to like the concept of a super app, of a mini program. You do the low barrier first, and you get ubiquity, and you get a massive amount of businesses, and then you can start adding in those things. So I think
it's interesting what you were saying about the wet thing. I don't know if this is true. This is secondhand knowledge, but someone was telling me about in Nepal or something like that. The people like in some of the villages are asking people to give them crypto because they don't even want cash, because like it's easy, like the gas fees or whatever they would have to pay on receiving crypto is less than, trekking to the nearest bank to go and like deposit their cash or whatever they need to do. Like the effort's heaps less. But I was just going to put something in your head, Kevin, to think about in this concept of what you're talking about, low barrier and stuff, because the West is a little bit different, because you have companies like Square that have made having sort of NFC readers like widely accessible in that sense, like to the point where you can plug it into your phone. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
But even with companies like Square, I think it's hard to imagine coming from the West, but the ease of just being able to print out a QR code. All you need is access to a printer. And so you don't need to register anything. You don't need to, you don't even need to register, a merchant account. You don't need to have any hardware. You don't need to sign up for anything. It's built into the app. You print it out and you can start accepting money. And that really was a game changer. And
then there was a second way that was so brilliant that WeChat did, whereas it's that WeChat and Alipay did, where it's okay, you can have a QR code and the user scans that, and that's a few steps, or the user can show their barcode or kind of like QR code, and the business scans them, and that sits on the back of existing retail or supermarket technology, where you scan the food items when you're at the retail, or you scan the barcode on a clothes item, and then you just go, okay, and now pay, and then you use that same, you just do a little bit of a software upgrade, and you go, okay, I've scanned all your clothes, you're at like I was gonna say JCPenney, you're at like Calvin Klein, and then you get they scan the clothes, and you're like, okay, now pay. You present your phone with a QR code, and then you scan that, boom, now you've paid. And you sit on the back of all of that, and there's just software that just adapts to existing hardware instead of needing to. You're totally right. Like everyone's really accepted Square, and there's all these other ones, but you're buying a lot of times now you're buying just a little thing, a little NFC chip, but you just don't need any of that. And now like the smoothest thing that we have in the West is buying a little NFC chip reader and then installing an app. Whereas you could just have nothing. You could just have whatever you already have existing. You could just have a smartphone. If you're a business that isn't retail, that doesn't have a scanner, you could just have a smartphone. You could scan their phone, and then you could just pay. So it still doesn't exist in the West. And to get back to Robbie's earlier question, I do not see a super app in the West right now.
Ooh,
So I'm doing like a segue back to your question. I do not see a super app in the West right now. I do see companies that are positioned to have one. That's kind of what I see. Like, I do, and that's kind of an interesting question. Is okay. Let's say that a super app. Who do you think is best positioned to create a super app? Besides this app, besides you, I think you're on an awesome journey. But who with the existing resources, Facebook, Apple, Google.
Uber, as I already said, but
Yeah,
Apple's
Uber.
different. I don't think Apple would ever make a super app because they've got the hardware. It doesn't make any sense. Like in that sense, like they're operating like iOS is a super app, like in
Right.
theory, right?
Completely
Like,
agree.
so it doesn't make sense in that sense. Google definitely, uh, like I mean, they have Android, but they're Google. What's it called? Like how you have Google Docs, Google Slides, like Sheets, all that kind of
Right.
stuff. Like your, what do you call it?
Cloud. They
Yeah,
actually don't really have a name for that. They call it like Google One, Google
yeah.
Drive. They don't have a name for that little
I
suite. It's
think
like
one
Google
that could
Workspace.
potentially no one like it has a no one loves this company, but I think they could become a super app with the right decisions. Is PayPal?
Hmm.
In that sense, they do so much volume in payments. But for some reason, everyone
But
just
so
hates the
painfully. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah. But Uber is
PayPal.
the one that I think is probably the closest. Instagram's doing some interesting stuff. Like Instagram has a very popular chat. Now they have a marketplace. They have like TikTok inside there. They have their normal feed. Like Reels is
Right.
TikTok. Their chat is a very popular chat. Their marketplace, people are buying things off, and then they have their normal home feed. Like they're expanding out pretty aggressively.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Audi.
actually very interesting. I'm kind of curious, kind of watching things develop from here. You see Venmo, and you see people you love Venmo. Venmo became super popular, but
Yeah.
it's always been standalone. It's always been sort of on its own. And even though I think Square and Facebook Messenger both tried to add sort of personal payments within their apps, but it just didn't work for some reason. And I'm actually quite curious, as to why why was Venmo so successful sort of as a standalone thing and never got integrated into another app. I mean, so going back to what I was saying about Grab and Gojek and these different apps that sort of control the wallet, if say Instagram and Venmo were to come together and so you were using it every day to see your friends' pictures and to chat with your friends, and then you also use it to pay your friends and to pay for things. That's when you start getting into super app territory. But that just seems like not really possible.
Is this something that we thought about as well? And I think it has to do with the content creation process, like the payment not being in the content creation process.
Hmm.
But this is also why I also want to be able to do things like, how I said you can, you don't need to exchange email addresses and it'll just go out to your Google and Outlook calendar. What we're going to do is allow people to put in their Venmo details, their Cash App details, and their PayPal details. And so when you go to pay someone, they'll just have their Venmo details there or their Cash App details there, and it'll open up in Cash App, and then you pay them. But what it'll start to do is get people using this app because the details are just there and you're already talking to them and you already
Right.
use
Totally.
Venmo, so you're fine with it. But then hopefully over time, when we release our own native payments platform, everyone's just already used to using us. So then it's just a natural transition. I don't know why no one's done that before personally. Like it seems like a
I'm
really obvious thing to do.
yeah.
I think Venmo was just early and people just got used to it. The Cash App was did a very good job because they marketed really well. They partnered with
Hmm.
influencers and all these kind of things. I haven't ever seen Facebook advertise the fact that they have payments in Messenger ever, or even
Yeah.
talk
Wait, do
about
they
it.
have payments? Do they have payments in
Yeah.
Messenger?
In America, they do. They don't have it in Australia. And this is
Okay,
the
I
other
haven't
weird
seen.
thing that, like, a lot of these companies do it in like one country and not the other, and so it doesn't have this kind of like viral effect, like in that sense. And
Right.
Yeah.
certain users have it, and certain users don't. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not too sure in that sense.
Well, man, I just wow, I'm such a fan of Robby, this app and your strategy there because I really agree with you. I think a lot of people miss the mark on Super App. For me, Super App or like what WeChat does so well is it's the front end shell that users see, but underneath it's all of these different things powering it. Um, and that's kind of the beauty is you kind of just become the front end trusted user experience where underneath you have all these different platforms powering all this stuff. You have many programs and there's other providers, and so I WeChat Pay and Alipay, it all sits on banks. It's all just you connect your credit card, your bank card, and then you can do payments. And actually, for WeChat Pay, it was actually Tencent Pay, this platform called Tong that provided all of the Tencent luckily kind of had all of the payment things in there. But WeChat was just a new branding of that. So I think the strategy of just everyone's like trying to create a payment feature is just plug in other people's payment features, and then if people use it, you can potentially slowly go out and get the 500,000 financial regulations that you need in every state of the United States. Like the
Yeah.
insane amount of regulation that you have to go through. I know because at WeChat we were considering going overseas, and then it was like every state has completely different regulations. But just use someone that has already done that, and then be the front end of that. They're going to be happy that they're getting more volume, but really you're getting users. You're just getting the same experience. Users don't really care too much
Exactly.
who's doing it.
Yeah.
They just want that feature. They want that enabled. So I think that makes a lot of that all makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a really brilliant strategy because you just want to be the front end. You just want to be the package of it. How that's happening doesn't matter too much. And that was actually going to be part of my question is why do you think, Robby, you're one of the few people I think that comes from the crypto space, which is a lot about fintech, but you also understand messaging and product and communications. I didn't even realize that Messenger can do payments. I do know through the grapevine that Facebook's Lyra hasn't really come online. They're kind of they're comprehensive payment tools. I kind of do know that might never come online through a grapevine. Um, and why is it so difficult? Yeah, partially is my kind of one question, but you already answered my second question of just what do you do about it, and you're just like, well, just latch
Right.
on to some existing solution.
I
But
think
I
you
think,
actually. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, sorry, go, Ado.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think you touched on something that is a huge benefit that WeChat has over the rest of the world, which is, China is such a huge market, and it is the same set of regulations that govern a billion people,
Centralized,
and there isn't
centralized.
another place where that exists. In the U.S.,
Correct.
The
you're
government
literally
made it
dealing with
easy.
different regulations in every single state, anywhere in South America, Africa, Europe. All of these separate states each have their own regulations, and so it actually is very difficult to build fintech or to build any sort of ubiquitous platform across a large number of people. That was what I was
Yeah.
going to say.
I'm going to do a shout out for a certain company that's a great company. They're called Synapse or Synapsify.
Synapse.
They're kind of like a
Show.
bank. They're kind of like a bank in a box. So if you ever do need to set up a payments company, they've got the back end covered in that sense. But yeah, like you're absolutely right. But I was just gonna say, I lost my train of thought. Kevin, what was your first question? You said,
Yeah. So the main question is how difficult is it to set up payments in especially the U.S. As kind of as an app, and then the second thing is because I do know it's difficult, but I don't really know all the details behind it. Because that gives a little bit of insight of. I really agree with you. I'm like I don't see why people aren't doing it in the U.S. and I just assumed it was really difficult. But I love your simple solution of just how difficult is that, and then what do you do about it? And your solution is we'll just sit on the back of existing solutions, Venmo,
I
PayPal.
remember what I was gonna say. I think
Yeah,
China, like, and especially in the East, people are much more like community orientated, and you rely on your community and a lot more and whatnot. And I think you're seeing that transcend into the products. Like WeChat isn't this
Mm.
just standalone app. It's a community. It's like an ecosystem of all these different businesses and whatnot. Whereas in the West, it's a little bit more egotistical. It's like, I'm building my business, and I'm going to be the man and build the big business. I think the more we can like partner together and leverage each other's tools and whatnot, and that's kind of like
right.
what WeChat does really, really well. And so, yeah, as a little sort of wrap up question that I think would be kind of interesting is like each of our sort of guesses on what's going to happen, whether Elon Musk will end up purchasing Twitter. Why? Like maybe like three questions. Why do you think he didn't end up purchasing it? Will he end up purchasing it? And if he or will he go and build his own super app, or will he just do nothing? Like in that sense, like why didn't he purchase it? And I guess what's next? If from his side, do you think he's not going to do anything? Do you think he'll buy Twitter? Do you think he'll build a separate app? I'll let you start, Kev.
Okay. lot of ideas. I had I have a similar question that I want to end on. We'll just end on these 4 questions. Maybe
Cool.
Audie can add a few more. We can end on 10 questions. No, I'm just kidding. Which is kind of, but it's related, and I think we can kind of answer it at the same time. And it's, can a super app happen outside of China? Like, we're talking about what is the one that's best equipped? Can it happen? And this is a question that kind of came from my gave a talk to this big bank in Asia called CLSA, and they were kind of going, well, WeChat happened in this environment of low government regulation, and that's where it was, and kind of government support, which is why it was so easy to just do payments across the whole China.
Absolutely.
Really,
Yeah.
Alipay had done all of the rails for that, and then WeChat was able to jump in. That's one. And two, not much regulation. And then three is like specifically not much regulation in antitrust aspects. So then WeChat and Tencent is able to just jump into all these different revenue streams. And then I guess even four is like on that not regulation again is in data controls, because WeChat just has so much data, and it goes along again with antitrust, is like, would an app be allowed to do all of the different things that WeChat does?
Let's maybe
so-
pause. Let's answer that question
Yeah.
first, because that's a pretty big question that you're asking right there. And
Yeah.
then we'll do the Elon one last. Is that
Okay, cool.
That's the basis of the question, right? Like, can
Yeah,
it work in
yeah.
the West? Yeah.
Yeah, so could it happen outside of China? And I kind of have this argument that I thought that question was really good that they asked me. I was like, wow, could it happen? Because it's like, and also I'm like, okay, well, could it happen now that China has so much regulation, right? Has so much regulation, has now new antitrust laws. Is WeChat only allowed because it's like grandfathered in? It's already existing. It's already so integral to life that they can't really get rid of it. But so that's kind of like my big monster of a question. I would argue, and I think that the question is good. It's like, okay, you have so much data. Is that even allowed to be had? I would argue that Google's ecosystem, and kind of what you were talking about, like with Sheets, Notes, etc., is massive, and it has actually even more data than WeChat has, which is kind of hard to imagine because WeChat has so much data from users. And it already is, in a way, a super app because it's a front end that follows you everywhere. And what I mean by that is you have your Google account, you use it for Chrome, and you use it when you're searching for things. Then when you log into things, you can log in with Google. So Google knows where you log in, and they follow you, and they even maybe know what you do there.
And then you got like maps, search, like all that.
And then you got just the Google Suite, map, navigation, search. You have email. Okay, those are just like the basics that you all start off from. But then you have Google Cloud and Drive and all of those things. Yeah, calendar, that's huge. So you have all of these things, but then just the fact that and then payments. You have payments, and then I use Google Password Saver, so they have the passwords of everything I log in. And then then again, on top of all of that, for me, one of the biggest things is being able to log into other places with Google and then connecting that ecosystem to whatever you log in with. I'm trying to have 6 fingers here. It's really funny in the video. I'm realizing I'm like trying to go 6 and I'm going like this.
You know what it reminds me of? Have you seen Talladega Nights with like Will Ferrell? Have you seen that movie?
No, I don't think I have.
When you watch it, you're going to understand what I mean. Has anyone on this call seen it?
Yeah.
You know when he's like getting interviewed for the first time and he's like hands are on like he doesn't know where to put his hands. Anyway, keep going.
So then you have these 6 things, but then the biggest one is that I'm just still trying. And then the last one again, the SDK or the API of being able to log in with Google to anything else makes it more like a super app, or what super app accomplishes, than any of those other things. Because all those things are awesome core services that Google provides, but then that platform aspect comes in when you just bring Google with you wherever you go. And then I log into something with Google, and then I go, yeah, share my payment because I'm here with Google. Now share my payment that Google has saved. Now share my location to this thing that I'm on that Google has saved. And
they also have
I bring
Google
it with
phones,
me, and
which we didn't touch on. It's a big thing too.
Oh yeah, well then you have just Android and everything else on top, on top of that. But that's, for me, is the most kind of reflective, because you asked earlier, like, what super app exists in the West. I think Google's the most situated. They just can't figure out which they have so many services, they can't figure out what anchor service they're going to use to provide everything off of it. Right
You know
now,
the
I kind
one
of
thing
see it
they've screwed up,
is
which is
like
kind of funny to what
Chrome.
we're talking about? No,
Yeah,
chat. Like Google's
yeah,
had to rebrand its chat like
social,
17 times. They've called it
social,
like chats and different like they for some reason
Hangouts.
they're just not cool. I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
It's like a weird thing. They haven't been able to get that right, which is weird.
I
Uh,
completely agree.
yeah.
I think like Google's like maybe they're all geniuses and they just can't relate to humans. They can't come down to earth. They can provide amazing tools, but then they can't just find a way for people
I
to
think
just
to
kick
answer
back.
to answer your question, my answer would be a super app will appear in the West. I think some aspects have already started. I think it's just going to look different. You know, it's not going to look like WeChat. Like
Totally.
they're going to be like apples and oranges. It's going to be a very different style product. You know, like Uber's doing right now, where you can book a restaurant, book a car, order your groceries, like all this stuff on a similar app on one app. You know, that's sort of getting into that territory. I think it's just going to look a little bit different. I think, you know, the West is very fond of Apple as well. Like it kind of has its own super app in the iOS Apple system that, you know, the West seems to be obsessed with. Like everyone loves their iPhone and their MacBooks and stuff like that. That's a very like Western orientated sort of operating system that everyone uses. Like, you know, I don't know if many people know this, and I'm probably going to blow your minds if you don't know this. Like you can copy something on your phone and paste it on your computer and vice versa. Like it's some of the stuff you can do is like magic. You can like grab things with your on your iPad. You can like
So
pinch
cool.
it and then press like paste on your computer and it pastes. It's like I grabbed it and I threw it into my computer. Like when you use those operating systems, it's quite special. But I think in order to get a super app style product, I think we're gonna see some like this is where sort of the crypto part of me sort of like comes out a little bit in
Totally.
like user owned networks.
Mm,
I think user ownership and users being rewarded for their contributions to the network. And you think about chats, they're like public utilities. I think there's going to be an element where there's a give back to the user, and then there won't be this sort of angst around these companies becoming monopolies and all these kind of things because the users will be benefiting from their growth. Like, imagine if every Uber driver and Airbnb host had stock. Like, how many people would have made, how much money they would have made from like, because they have contributed so much to the growth of those networks. I don't think people would be pissed off when they grew. Like they'd be happy about it. Like in that sense. So I think it's just going to
yeah.
change the structure of how things need to work for to grow as big as like Facebook and these kind of companies.
Imagine if Facebook cared about user value, how good that ecosystem would be. Just imagine that. I I'm just giving such a big smack to Facebook. I completely agree with you, Robbie. I think there just needs to be a really I talked earlier about value creation and like user value creation. And I just think that's something that fundamentally and culturally Facebook ends up doing so poorly. And it's especially as they just become addicted like an IV drip to advertisements. And you look at their revenue model, it's 98% ads. I don't even know what the other 2% is. It's like and
I don't
they're just
overly like to bash them though. Like I
I
think
know,
they cop a lot of slack. But you think about
yeah,
like, you know, Facebook has more users than Christianity, right? Like they've done something right in 10 years. And I mean, Zuck purchased WhatsApp and Instagram, which are probably two of the greatest acquisitions of all
brilliant.
time. Like, you know,
Totally.
it's very easy to and you know, built one of the greatest ad platforms that have ever existed. In so many businesses have been built off the back of that. But I do think there has been too much of a focus on advertising because they
Right.
centered so much of their business around that. It kind of limited them from being able to go other places. So I try to avoid attacking
Facebook
Facebook too
bashing.
hard, yeah, because
Yeah.
it, it's to do what Zuck's done is nothing short of remarkable. Like in that sense, it's a remarkable feat in terms of what he's achieved and the scope and breadth of the platforms that you know he's that they own between WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. Like three platforms that have the largest user bases on Earth. In that sense, it's wild. In that sense,
I'll turn it into a compliment sandwich. The things that Zuckerberg has accomplished is amazing, and it's like the things that he has done for I think humans is brilliant. I just can connect with anyone I want. Okay, middle. This is the not compliment. holy crap, find something other than ads to like fund everything. You are an ad addict, and it's like heroin to you, and you need to get off of it because you cannot innovate with just this one objective of advertising
one
revenue.
thing that is
And then,
under
but I
under.
gotta give the other
Sorry, go.
compliment. I actually like the move into Meta. I love Meta. I love that he's jumping into the metaverse. I think that was brilliant and a a big risk, and he cops a lot of flack for it. But I like it. Okay, here's my sandwich.
I was just going to show we because we run a remote team, we play virtual mini golf quite often.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, like that's how we
I'm
sort
gonna
of
sneak into your next mini golf sesh because I have it too, man.
I'll invite you. No, I was just going to say one thing that's undervalued about Facebook is Marketplace. Marketplace is remarkable.
Totally.
Like
That's a lot of value creation.
That's a huge value, and they don't take
Yeah.
a cent from Marketplace.
Yeah,
They don't clip
that's
off
big.
users and all that kind of stuff. Like Marketplace is a remarkable product. All right, let's wrap it up on the Elon one. I'll go first. I think the reason he didn't buy it is because he felt like he overpaid for it. I definitely think like I do believe in that story. I think that Twitter does have a shit ton more bots than they say they do, and it was a really good excuse to get him out of it. But I think he knew that going in. He's talked about Twitter's bots well before he made that acquisition. So I think it was just an easy way for him to get out. Do I think Elon will buy Twitter in the end? Some people are speculating that he will. Like it'll go into a legal battle, Twitter's stock will crash, and then you'll be like, screw it, I'll buy it for 15 billion.
I'll save you out. He's like, I'll save you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that
I'll destroy you and I'll save you.
That may happen. I think it would be hard to turn Twitter into a super app. I really do. Like, I think to turn Twitter from what it is today into something like WeChat, like it'd be interesting to see how you would go about that. It'd take a lot of work. I actually think Elon would be better off building something from the ground up, personally, because he has like, if someone said to Elon, "What's your go-to-market strategy?" It's me. Like, like in that sense, like I built it, so everyone's going to use it. But
Totally.
I don't personally think he'll end up doing it in the short term. I think Tesla and SpaceX, he's a pretty busy guy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bet that he doesn't. But it's probably the bias in me because, he would. I don't really feel like competing with Elon. In that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of not surprised in a way. I don't know. The whole thing that he got in trouble with before with the SEC, where he said, I'm taking Tesla private, and then that didn't happen, and then now he's saying I'm going to buy Twitter, and then that doesn't happen, and I feel like he's kind of he's lost a little bit of credibility, at least from my perspective.
It's not surprising when you read his tweets, though. Like he just tweets whatever he wants. Like in that sense, like,
he really does, and he's he definitely has shown himself to be a little bit of a loose cannon, a little bit of an unreliable narrator, maybe is a good way to put it. And so whether he buys it or not, of course, right now definitely it's too expensive. He kind of made that announcement, that purchase announcement at just absolutely the peak price. So he definitely has some buyer's remorse there. And I actually think that Twitter is not a bad place to start.
Interesting. Okay.
Because in terms of building a super app, because it has already captured the attention of the public, right? So
that's true.
So it's something that is central to a lot of people's sort of daily conversation. And so, if you were to add, say, a wallet to that, and you were to add, more features for booking or more platforms, then there's some potential there. But I totally agree. I mean, it's such a long shot, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm. Kev?
Okay, I'll give my my 2 cents on this. I don't exactly know why he didn't buy it. I want to say I kind of like Elon Musk. I know he's become a really divisive guy in the U.S.
I love him as well.
Yeah, I love I just love what he's done. And like when I saw him creating Tesla 5 or 10 years ago, I was like, oh my God, I just have so many hippie friends from my hometown, Bellingham, and 2 hours north of Seattle, and they're like, corporations are ruining the world and we need to all just love the planet. And I'm like, everything you have is because of corporations, and you just come from such a place of privilege, and you are such a part of pollution by existing. You don't realize it, and you think by just yelling at corporations that you're saving the world in any way. You're completely off, and we need to do things that helps people be incentivized to bring about more sustainability. And he does so much of that with Tesla and Solar City, and that match between economics and sustainability and environmental friendliness is something that's so core to what I want to accomplish in life that I just can't help but just love what he's done. Um, then okay, so then why not? I think there's a little bit of a Dunning Kruger effect, which is the more you know about something, the more you realize. Like in the very beginning, even knowing something, you think it's really easy, and then you get to learn more about it, and you realize it's really complicated. I think I love Elon Musk talking about Twitter. He's like, how the heck can't they figure out these bots? There's like in his first podcast that I know Robby listened to. He's like, it's not rocket science. Like he's like, just figure out the bots, and he goes then the number, and then he says the number of bots on Twitter is as unknowable as the human soul. He's like,
Yeah.
there's no amount of alchemy. He just is hilarious. He's like, there's no amount of alchemy. They're trying to do all these alchemy to figure out the number of bots, and they can't figure it out. I think it's just I think the world maybe of tech is just a little too convoluted, abstract, and like software is so not visceral that it's not exactly his world. He's more like nuts and bolts, and he's
I mean, he
genius,
built
and he like
PayPal. Like that's a pure
yeah he
software.
did yeah he did build PayPal. But I'm just saying maybe it's just not his. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I'm like, that actually completely compromises what I was
Yeah.
saying.
I,
He
I
made
don't
like
I don't doubt
yeah,
his software abilities in any capacity
yeah, that's
whatsoever.
so true. I
Look at
just
all the software in a Tesla. You ever been in a Tesla? That screen is
that's
incredible.
actually
Like
so
the
true. It's
UI
so
and UX
software.
in,
It's a
in
software
Tesla is,
product. Yeah.
yeah.
I rescind my comment. Oscar, please delete everything I just said.
Sorry, I had to
No,
challenge you on that one because I
you're
think
so
you
spot
weren't
on.
being fair in
No,
that
you're
sense.
so spot on. But I completely agree. But I do feel like it feels to me like part of it would have been he got into it and he just realized that it's a little more complex than he thought. And at least the bot situation is, everyone's like, he already knew there were bots. Why does he then go and say it's too much? I think that he didn't realize how hard it was to figure out how many bots there were. I still think there's like a little bit of a Dunning Kruger effect where it's like, where he found out more about it, he realized, wow, this is actually
Hmm.
strangely weird, and he said he's strangely hard to figure out, and he said that. And I don't think he'll buy it in the end. I think, and then the next question is, well, then will he do something else? I mean, man, to your point about him doing PayPal, and actually, I want to say I don't think Twitter is that well positioned to become a super app. And there's this word that we used to use in WeChat called gong shu, and shu means shuqiu means requirement, and gong means like pillar requirement. Basically, it means a a material necessity. And I do not feel like Twitter and tweeting is any need that I have. I do it sometimes because I'm like, oh, this is a good way to kind of maybe get my name out there, get famous. It's like this weird. I'm just like, this is a way I can get famous, get credibility, but I don't need to tweet. There's no need there. Where I
I
think,
do take Ade's side there because Twitter, like people are so addicted to it. Like people who use Twitter all the time are some of the stickiest users of any platform ever. But the weird thing is in Australia, Twitter isn't really a thing. Like
yeah,
when I'm in the US, I use Twitter way more than when I'm spending time in Australia. Like it's way bigger here.
I think needs for me. I mean, I'm biased because I've never really been a Twitter user, and I just don't
Hmm.
feel like tweeting is a need. So I think needs for me are communication, mobility, um, eating food, so like food
Yeah.
delivery, um, booking, like even travel. I mean, that's kind of a part of mobility, is more of a need. Accommodations, all these are more of needs than tweeting. I personally don't feel the need to tweet, but so that's a bias. And so, do I think he'll make his own? Yeah, maybe he'll get bored, but I feel like he's got enough stuff to do. He needs to tweet. So that's mine.
Very, very true. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time and
Thanks so much.
for having
you
me
guys.
Oh
on.
yeah, wait, sorry. We're the hosts. Robby,
Oh,
thanks so much
sorry.
for coming on. No, you're like
I'm just used to doing my own.
Robby, we got to learn from Robby. He's way better than us at
Yeah.
closing a podcast.
Yeah.
He's
I'm
like,
getting that.
we got ours just really drag on. Robby, thanks for taking control a little bit there. We need every bit of help we can get. Thanks for coming.
No problem. Thank you.